So what are some things that you can do post-decision? One time, my wife and I were meeting with a couple, and they were stuck in the blame game. They were constantly criticizing one another, and that would lead to defensiveness, and then things would escalate. And they kind of seemed to be stuck there, and they recognized that criticism was something that they needed to work on, and they needed to figure out a better way to be able to handle that. But at the same time, they were very dismissive of one another. So they were in two different spots. They recognized criticism, and they were looking for solutions there. The dismissiveness, they didn't really recognize that they were both doing that. And I bring this up because it's important to understand that there's different types of behaviors, and they might be at different spots in the recognition of wanting to change. When they're pre-decision, consequence questions work great because it helps to explore the impact. When they're post-decision, then they're looking for advice and tips. A friend of mine once went to a therapist, and he called me after the meeting, and he was very frustrated because he went there with very specific things that he wanted to work on, and he knew what they were. And the therapist just kind of asked him more general questions and consequence questions, and he walked away very frustrated because he didn't receive any practical tools or any steps and things that he could do. And he called me up kind of saying, gee, that wasn't worthwhile. And it's because he walked in there wanting practical suggestions. When you're post-decision, advice works great. And I know when Michelle and I were trying to change, we read books, we went to a therapist, we asked our friends for help. We were looking for tools and steps and tips and things that we could do that would change. So I call this the how-to phase. You're looking at how do I do this and how do I change? So marriage education can work great here. And I look at things like, so how do we build our bond or our connection? How do I increase my positive interactions? Might be, how do I validate my spouse? How do I decrease criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling? How do you rebuild trust? How do you forgive? How do you recognize and manage your emotional triggers? How do you build physical intimacy? All of these how-to steps are great, and this is a part of the purpose of marriage education. So let me give you some tips. Recognize pre-decision versus post-decision. Where are they at, and have they decided to change a particular behavior or not? 2, recognize that there are multiple behaviors. For example, that couple that I mentioned, they were post-decision on criticism, but pre-decision on dismissiveness. In 3, use the tools, and this is where marriage education can help, and all of the how-to tools and practical suggestions that marriage education can provide. So again, recognize if they're pre-decision or post-decision. 2, remember that there's multiple behaviors and recognize what those different behaviors are. And 3, use the tools and use the practical suggestions that marriage education can provide.